Hello and welcome back. Well, today we're going to have a very different structure, right? Because I'll actually be demoing to you guys a homework assistant, right? So this is actually fully AI powered, and I'm going to show you how the backend was structured as well as the front end code that powers the client. But before all of this, I would actually just proceed to show you guys what we'll have to offer today. As you can see, we have a very sleek interface, very mobile responsive, by the way. So you can just minimize that and you see it's really good on mobile as well, right? So we're actually following like a chat GPT kind of UI where you have like a conversation on the left hand or the sidebar panel, and then you have the actual chat interface on the right. So this is something that we're doing, and what we have here is that we can actually just have, you can create a new chat by clicking on the new chat button, and then you can select a curriculum. You can have British, Nigerian, American, and whatever. Just put your curriculum there, and it's going to work. And then you can actually just start a chat by clicking on the start chat button. When you click on this, it's going to prepare your chat. As you can see, it says start your conversation. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask it a few questions, maybe on British history or something. I can say, can you tell me about the British history? All right, so what I'm going to do, you can actually upload document and all of those, but I'll show you how this works later. I'm just going to send this. So if you send the first message, you're going to like prepare the chat or whatever. It's just a little bit of aesthetic that we added. You can tend to remove this if you want to, not necessarily like required or anything. All right, so it's going to prepare your chat and it's going to basically generate the answer for you. So you can see we already have the conversation title generated, exploring British history, and then we have the answer to it. So it said, hello, I'm excited to help you explore British history. Since you didn't specify your class level, we provide. So class level is actually a thing within the prompt that we specify. So if it's actually not provided, we just proceed to give you what it's all about, right? So you can see that I'll provide you a brief overview suitable for both junior and senior secondary levels. Overview of British history gives us like the key period. So you can see right here we are rendering the markdown, right? So this is actually what we're using. So in the prompt, in the models, so when we get into that, I'll show you how we are handling that all from the backend, the model we're using, as well as the different format we have been, we're returning. So you can see all of this very good, nice and clean. I can just tell you that, okay, maybe I just want to read about specific events, watch documentaries, historical films, and gather notes of key periods and whatever. I can just ask, what is the most notable of all the periods, right? So that'll be fine for all the periods. That's be good to know. So it's immediately has this question. You can see we have a very cool loading indicator here that shows like, oh, AI is thinking, right? So immediately it has that. So I'm excited to help you to learn about the history. Let's dive into the most notable period. So it was able to like break it down and give me like Victorian era as the most notable period and whatever. So you can see it's very conversational. It's able to track like the previous message or messages as the case may be, and being able to make sense out of those in order to reply like newer, most recent messages. So you can see all of this. Very good, good. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to show you guys how this looks. Before I show you guys, well, let me show you guys how this looks on mobile. I can just, minimize this quickly and minimize that. And what I'm going to do, this is the mobile view. You can see the way it looks. Looks very good. Looks very good on mobile. Very mobile responsive. You can see it's all stuck now. We basically have this lets you date timestamp right there, as you can see. And then when you scroll down and you ask more questions, we have our little timestamp here. So everything properly stated. So you can click on that to click to create new chat. You can see we are connected. It is actually one way to know if we're connected to the socket, because we're actually using a WebSocket connection. So what we do is that we connect it to socket, and when you ask a question, we are able to emit an event and on the client we listen for a different event, and that event is actually what what will be rendered, obviously, right? So this is actually just a basic flow. So when we start doing the technical aspect, you guys are going to understand it more, right? So yeah, so this is actually the very first flow. I show you guys that you can actually switch from one view to another, and you can actually upload content as well. So this is actually an example of an uploaded PDF, right? So you can upload a PDF and ask, oh, what's this PDF talking about and stuff like that. So it's going to give you like an idea of what's going on within that PDF, or probably provide you like some sort of summary and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask GPT. We're going to just ask it maybe supply like an image. So what I'm going to do, I'm just go Pixabay or something. I need an image of an historian, maybe just any historian, so we can be able to of a famous, let's do the word of a famous historian, okay. Who's this guy? I don't know anyone here. Let's see. I think I know this guy. Who's that? Yeah, he's one of those great guys, I think. Okay. Oh, I have to pay. I just need a free version. Can I get that? I don't know. They don't let me do that. All right, so I think there's a free picture form like Pixabay or something. Let's look for one of those. Pixabay, sorry. Historian. Or just random pictures. It doesn't need to be a philosopher or whatever. We can just find one of those pictures and use it, right? So let's look for it. Okay, so the Viking warrior was, I don't know. Let's pick this. Let's pick that. Let's see how smart the AI is. All right, so let's download that. The image looks like AI generated by the way, but we'll just ask it to tell us more about the image. I think that's one strength test we can do. I don't know if the prompt itself is perfect, but I'll show you guys the prompt we're using, by the way, so you guys have an idea. But yeah, so we can just grab this, like, I think this is fine. Let's download that. Okay, so this is downloaded, Viking, whatever that is. And I'm just going to create a new, well, not a new chart. I can use this one. Summarize this and tell me about this image. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go in there, upload. You can actually upload, like I've added this functionality to upload an image as well as a document. So document is just mainly in the PDF format, right? So I think the max size is like 10 MB or so. So let's do image for now. So let's do, I think there's a bit of a bug here that you guys might want to resolve. So you don't need to send it first before going in. So the way it works is you have to select an image first before you upload, but you can actually just make it not behave in that weird form. Yeah. So I've added the image, so I will just say, so tell me about the image. Okay, so you can see we have the image uploaded to Cloudinary. I'll show you how we're doing that, by the way. And so he said, I can't provide specific details, but however, I can help to analyze the themes or context which might be represented. The image could represent a figure from ancient history or whatever, right? So perhaps that's smart. That's really smart, right? Because this is actually a warrior, right? So it's been able to detect it that it's actually a warrior or a gladiator and stuff like that, right? So I think this is actually like the building blocks of how you can go about it, because it was able to know, if you notice, that we're asking previously about historical figure, because that's what the conversation is all about, history, and it was able to know, oh, okay, this is like some sort of warrior, a gladiator in time past, right? So that makes really sense, solid sense if you think about it, right? So this is actually a very good ways for us to go about it. And I think there's one other cool feature. I'm going to refresh this for you guys real quick. And when you come back to like previous conversation or whatever, you can now see it as an attachment, and then you can view, right? So you can see the image just now, we have it like an actual image, but once you leave the chat and you come back to the conversation, there's no point showing you anymore about the image or whatever, because it kind of makes the entire viewport to become a bit crowded. So we don't want that. So we basically just replace it with like a view attachment. But so when you click on that, you're going to see the image that you uploaded. How cool that is, yeah? So yeah, so that's just the basic idea of how these apps work. Mobile wise, really good. I think we're done with enough of the talking. Let's talk about the technical implication on how we're able to spin this up in both the front end side of things as well as the back end side, and then we can proceed from there. All right, and welcome back. So I'm going to take you guys through how the entire backend architecture works for the homework assistant, and from that we might want to discuss more on the client consumption side of things as well. All right, so let's start. Let's start with the backend side. So what we have, I'm going to show you the backend code is actually part of a bigger code base, so you understand why I can't really share the entire thing, but I'll walk you guys through the most important part of it, and I think that should be it, right? So first off, I think the first thing here that we should discuss is to look into the actual diagram, flow diagram. And the way it works is that we basically have three entities, which is the user, the socket server, and then we have the homework assistant, right? So what happens is that on mount, what the user would do is that it's going to connect to the socket server, right? So when this connection actually happens, what we're taking the token as well as the application ID. So these are just unique identifiers to know which application they are connected to and stuff like that. So once we basically connect to the socket server, what will happen is that the socket server will send us back a system message. So we basically have a distinct event called system message, right? So anything I'm actually separating by a column, just know that they are different events. So homework assistant request as an event, homework assistant response as an event. All right, so the socket server sends us back a welcome message via the system message event. So what this means is that the front end or the client will need to listen to this event. So if you're using SocketIO or the WebSocket, you basically have to listen to it with a .on command, right? So when you use the .on command, it can be able to receive messages from that specific event. All right. So what happens is that the user can decide to trigger a message, right? You can decide to like ask a question, right? Maybe what is the price of Bitcoin 2025, right? So the way we actually go, we have a separate event, which is the homework assistant column request. So with this actually distinct events for us to send questions, right? So any question we want to send, we basically utilize this event to send it. So when we send this event, what will happen is that the socket server is definitely going to process it, like it's going to like process the question and it's going to send it over to the homework assistant. Homework assistant is just like a separate service. I'll show you guys on the back end. It's just a separate service responsible for processing question and giving us back an answer, right? So what will happen is that socket server will send to the homework assistant service to obviously like process the question. Once the homework assistant service gives us back a response, which is like an answer, a generated answer, we take it back to the WebSocket. What the WebSocket will do is going to emit it back to the homework assistant response, right? So send the answer back to the user, right? So that means the user basically needs to listen with on this event to be able to get an answer. So when the user listens on that event, then they have the answer, and then the entire flow is almost complete. But what will happen is that what happens if the user tends to like log out or disconnect? So that's actually, it's going to send like a disconnect command, and we're going to just log the conversation, right? And then homework assistant, that's it, obviously, right? So when we disconnect, the flow basically just ends, right? So these are actually all the entities that we're dealing on when we're actually looking at the backend system. So enough of the flow diagram. I hope you guys understand this. If you don't, just pause it, try to go about the flow again, go on the flow, and you should be able to get it right. So let's click on either one of these. I'm going to close it because we don't need it. And this, I'm using a very basic Express Node.js application. And what we have here is that I'm going to show you where we are initiating or initializing the socket service. So you can see we have the new socket service. So this is actually where we are um, initiating it. So at the root or the base of our project, right? So we're basically just new socket service, and then we're passing it the HTTP server. So this is actually, if you're already familiar with how Node.js works, you have to create like a server in Express, an Express server, and that server you can use it. So this is the same server that we are tying to the service. So why we're doing this is that we want to be very specific, right? So that the WebSocket basically run on the same port as the backend, right? So we don't want a situation whereby the backend is running on one port, the WebSocket is running on the different port and stuff like that. That's going to create a lot more conflict than we anticipate. So we don't want those situations. So we can, just definitely go with the socket service. So now let's go over to the socket service. So I click on that. Okay, hold on. Okay, so I think we can. Hold on. Okay, so I think we can just proceed. Let's be sure that we're on the right track. Yes, we are. All right, sorry about that, guys. So now we have this is actually our own socket service. We're doing a bunch of things there, but I'm going to go straight to the point. So this is actually where we're initiating. We're creating a new server. Well, not really like creating a new server, but what we're doing here is that we want to map the Express server to the SocketIO server, right? So we actually do this. So this server is actually imported from SocketIO. So when we do this and we pull this server as a parameter for the server coming from the SocketIO, we basically initialize a socket server, so to speak, right? So I don't know if that is confusing, but it's just the way it is. So once you do this, you are initiating a socket server per se. So this is what we're putting within the IO block, right? So if you notice something very cool about this project is that we're using the WebSocket namespace, right? So I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but namespace is actually a way for us to be able to distinguish between different. If your application have like different services or web services within it, right? You might want to differentiate this, right? So if you can see, we have a class booking WebSocket event where the tutor and the learner will have to communicate, and also we have the homework assistant socket implementation where they where you can basically ask questions and then the AI gives you back like an answer in real time and stuff like that. So this is exactly how it is. We have to map it into namespaces so we are able to, have proper separation of concerns, right? So let's get into the homework namespaces, what we care about. So the homework namespace right here, you can see this is it right here. So I'm going to just open it up for us. So I click on this, you can see. So the very first thing we do on socket event connection. So I've defined this socket event. It's just kind of like a list of different events that we'll be supporting for now. You can add more as your application grow. But yeah, so we just have the basic ones, which is like connection, disconnection, reconnection attempt, reconnect attempt, error message, ping event, and so on. Right. So let's get back to this. So when you connect the first time, the very first thing we tell you is connecting to work assistant namespace with a socket ID. Just take it out. Oh, you are connected, and then we get a token. Right. So in our, as you can see, when I was giving you that diagram the other time, I tell you that the way you connect to the socket server is via your token and your homework assistant application ID. So if you come here now, you can see we are taking the token and then the homework application ID as well, homework assistant application ID. So we're taking this to you from the query, right? So socket allows you to pass into the query and you're able to like retrieve it on the server side, right? So we do a couple of checks here to make sure that the the user is valid. We're just using a basic is valid token. So I'm going to show you how this function looks like. I'll open it up for you. So we do auth service verify user auth token. Just open that up for you. A very basic thing. And it did this dot decode auth token. This is just JWT thing. This is here. JSON web token of verify. This is just it. We're very basic. We want to just verify the token so we're able to extract like the user ID in the token and stuff like that. So if you're already working with Node.js, you know how these things work, right? So it's very straightforward. And the next thing is we need a way to be, hold on quick. We need a way to be able to check if the token is valid, which is what we just did. And so we check, right? We run a few check here. So you can see if we don't have any user ID from the token whatsoever, we say that, oh, invalid token for socket ID, that we emit an error event, right? So what this means is that the front end needs to listen to the error event, so it's able to send back the appropriate error messages, right? So I will show you, this is very interesting, how you guys will debug WebSocket on the client. I don't think a lot of people know about this, but your Chrome, as well as if you're using it's a HTTP client like Postman, there's a way you can basically debug all of this. I'll show you guys that. It shouldn't be a big deal. Meanwhile, while I'm just talking, let me open the Postman up on the background. So while it's loading. All right, so we'll check if the user, if we don't find a user, we send the error event and then we disconnect, and that's the end of the flow for you, right? So if you're not providing us the right detail, we don't want to proceed to the next block of code. It doesn't make any sense, right? So we'll check again if the application ID is valid, the one we have from the query. So if we have like a valid application ID, at least if it exists, right, we proceed. But if it doesn't exist, we just return you application ID is required, then we give you that validation error right there, we disconnect, and then that ends the flow. The next thing we do is that we check if the application ID being specified matches the basic regex structure, the UUID regex structure of just a PostgreSDB, right? So there's a way you check if a piece of string is a UUID. So this is actually the very basic regex I'm using right here. It needs to be of a specific length, and then there needs to be some sort of special characters within it. So I hope that makes sense. All right. So from there, we basically have the class booking, right? So this one, you don't need to worry. Oh, this is under the class booking namespace though. This is what I mean. So all right, good. All right, so we have the application. So here we are just checking. We have the homework assistant application model. I'll show you guys that, how that looks like. Contains the user ID, the plan ID, the payment ID, just for us to record payment. Contains the tier, the sub tier. Tier is like monthly or yearly thing, right? Monthly, yearly, depending on because for a user to be able to use the system, they need to make a payment, right? And once they pay, they're able to actually use the system and ask questions and get back generated responses and stuff like that. All right, nice. Okay, so now we check if the application is valid, if it's actually valid payment and stuff like that, if it's a successful payment. So we check, so if there's no successful payment, we'll just tell you that, oh, you have to wait here. You've not made payment, you have an invalid application ID or whatever, and then we'll disconnect and throw you out, right? So if you're able to pass all of this criteria and you're able to, you have a valid token, then you have a valid application ID, the next thing we do is I will create some sort of chat room, right? So we can see we have it prepended with HWA underscore. But it is very important just for us to be able to distinguish between different or multiple rooms. So in the future, in case we have different socket implementation and we have different rooms, we can be able to go into each of these specifically without having to, be conflicted, right? So, sorry. So we join the socket right here, socket.join, join the chat room, and then we can be able to send the first welcome message. So we have a system message event, which we already shown you guys. It's just system message, as you can see from there. And what we're going to do, we're going to say, oh, I am Brilliant. Yeah, well, this is actually the company responsible for, I was actually building it for Brilliant and stuff like that. and then it tells you how can I help you today. So this will be the first message you receive as a user, as far as you're listening to the socket event system message, right? So once we send you that, what we're going to do, we're going to get all the history. So that's the second thing. So history is basically, if for example I create a conversation, and in this conversation my first question is, "I tell me about ABC," right? And the second question is, "I tell me about CDF," right? These are two different messages within the same conversation, right? But when I actually mount the page for the first time, I should be able to retrieve all of these messages in in the order of when they were created, right? So that we're able to process it correctly on the client, right? So yeah, so this is exactly why we need the history. So what we do is that we created like we have it on the Homework Assistant conversation. There's actually a table for it, which is right here. Homework Assistant conversation group model. I'm going to open that out for you guys to see how that model looks like. So it takes in like the title, the application ID, is archive, is start, and so. So this is just for us to know the group that the application belongs to, that they um, make, because every message is takes in like a group ID. This group ID is what we use to, you know, what we use to separate one conversation from the other. So if we are fetching all the list of a conversation, we can actually, we are using this function right here to use get homework assistant history. So I'll open it up. Okay, so what we're doing a basic query with a group ID and the application ID. Then we list it. I can see we are ordering it based off of the created at in a descending order, right? So with this, we basically have all the histories. So this is something that we can actually modify in the future. Maybe you want to add the load more effect and whatever. We may want to paginate all of this. We may want to paginate all of this so that we are able to list it out in the correct order, right? So that being said, we can actually go back to here, right? So we'll get the history, and once we get the history, the next thing we do is to emit it, right? So we emit the history. We have a separate event here, as you can see. It's called homework_assistant history response. So we'll get all the responses from the history, and then we'll send it to the client. So this is the exact flow for it, and yeah. So once we have all of this, we're good. We're good with the first part, which is the first event, which is the homework assistant history request. So we're done with this one, right? So we have a different event, which is the homework assistant request. So this is actually very good when you want to send an actual message, right? So if I hover over, you can see homework_assistant request. The first one was homework assistant history request. Once we want to get all the history, right? So the first one, if you don't, if you get it correctly, the first one we had, hold on, okay. All right, see. So the first one we have was just fetching the history. The second event that we have is so making the proper request. So here we want to send the question, right? So we are actually validating a few of these. I'm going to close all of this up. We're validating the message. I created a distinct joy validator for the messages. So if, for example, we're using this for the homework assistant, we expect it to have like an event name to be able to have some data. Data can actually be message, media URL, or just in case you want to upload an image or a document. And we have the message type, which could be, like I said, image, document, and stuff like that, right? So as you can see here, can be image, document, can be text, can be system generated. So taking the curriculum, taking the class, which is optional, taking a group ID, taking if it's a new chat or not. Because this new chat and the group ID, they're actually mutually exclusive, right? So I think one of them will have to be there at every point in time. You don't need to specify both and stuff, right? You can see this is what we are using the check for, right? It can actually be one of them, shouldn't be both at any time. Okay, so once we do the validation and the validation is good, what we do is that we get everything from the message data, the data that has been passed in, and we're going to run our check, right? So if it's a new chat and there is no group ID whatsoever, we want to create a conversation group. So that means new chat means new conversation, right? So we'll create a new conversation group, and it's very easy. We have a way we are creating a new conversation group here. What we do is that we generate a title for the group. So we're actually using GPT, the work we're using GPT 3.5 Turbo here. There's actually a different place where we're using a different GPT agent, which is just GPT4 mini for most of our question answer generation, right? So as you can see, we generate a title of here, and then this title is what we have here, and then we use that to create the homework conversation model like I showed you before, right? Which is just the title as well as all of this, right? So we added a few other fields like is starred, is archived, just in case you want to start it, or in case you want to archive it or delete it, as the case may be in the future, so that I can hide all the messages within it. Okay. All right, good. So now you know how to create a conversation group. Okay, let's go back to Socket event. So now we have the new group. What we want to do is to emit. So we have emit the new group info back to the client. So now we tell the client that, oh, the new group has been created. So you don't really need this event, but it's just a way for us to notify the client that, oh, we know that you tried to create a group, but now it is actually created. So the entire point of using WebSocket is a real-time communication, a real-time bi-directional communication, right? So we should be able to get things like in real time and prompts and feedbacks. All right. So once we have that, this is actually the case where we have like a new chat, but the other cases where we don't, we already have an existing group ID and all of that, so we don't really need that. So what we do here is that we just once the AI start thinking, we just say, oh, Brilliant's AI is thinking. Well, we can actually choose to move this on top if we don't mind, really, right? So we can put it here if we don't mind. Well, it doesn't really matter where you put it, it still function the same way. So the next thing we do is that we validate ability to generate answer, right? So what I've done here is just a small function. What this does is that it makes we are running some check against like the file size, the token, and all of those to make sure that the user has enough token in his wallet balance, and we keep two balances, which is the token balance as well as the storage balance, right? So token balance is just the token that the user have. So we are using a crediting system where you purchase a particular plan, we give you a specific amount of token, and the same thing applies for storage, right? So if you buy a specific plan, we give you a lot of gigabytes, like 10 gigabytes to 50 gigabytes for uploads, right? So we're taking care of of all of this with this basic function, right? So here we validate if the user basically have enough balance in his wallet, and if it does not, we just say that insufficient balance or generate answer, and then we'll throw you out, right? So we don't want you to game the system, right? So the next thing is, can remove that, it's not necessary. The next thing here is that we generate an answer. So I've created an homework assistant service like I showed you on the flow diagram to generate an answer. So this is actually a service we're using to generate an answer. And as you can see, we just get a question, we get a curriculum, and what we have here is particularly straightforward. And what we do, we're running if you check, right? So we can see we instantiated the extracted text. So this is actually for PDFs. So if we're having PDFs, we try to extract the text from the PDF so we can pass it straight to the model, right? Because that's actually one way for you to work with vision. GPT4o is not really particularly performant when you start talking about vision and stuff like that. So that's why you need to actually add like an extra layer on top by extracting the text out of the PDF and passing this to the actual model. All right, so yeah, so that's that. And what we do here, we first fetch all the recent conversation, the last 10 recent conversation. So this is how it's able to detect it via memory, right? So if I ask you, oh, tell me about the history of the Great Britain, it was able to tell me something, but when I asked a follow-up question, it was able to refer back to the previous questions I asked and use that as a premise, which makes sense, right? All right, so the next thing is we get all the recent conversation. What we do is that we're going to map all this conversation, we're going to reverse it, right? And we're going to kind of, map it in such a way that we just want to put the row here, content, and name, right? So we'll turn into a flat map with all of these properties. And once we have that as a flat map, we're good. We basically have the conversation history. So it's going to be an array of objects containing the row, content, and name, which makes sense. So if you scroll down a bit, this is where we have the system prompt. So this is actually very much elaborate, so you can actually do with it the way you want. But this is actually a much more protected material, by the way. But so I'm going to just skim through it, and we're going to. You can see it just contains like some core interaction rules, some response structure, some interactive techniques, quality checks, and so on. So there are lots and lots of different things that goes on behind the scene right here. So I'm going to skim through it quickly and go over to the next thing. There's quite a lot. We can really go over all of them. And we have the enhanced user prompt with context reference. So this is actually just a user prompt. So we want to be able to allow the AI model to be able to refer to past questions, right? So this is why we have a kind of a memory bar within it. So this is actually part of the user prompt. And what this does is that we check all the recent conversations. We just tell it that operate stuff we discussed, we give it all those recent conversations. And the current question, we'll put it here, curriculum, put it here, class, if we have it, we'll put it there. If we don't, it doesn't matter. And then we'll tell it to provide clear explanation, practice problems, next step suggestion. That's the one reason. If you take a look at the chart, it was able to give us the next steps, right? So next steps there is coming from, from all of these prompts that we have here, which makes sense, right? All right, so we have the messages. So we basically have the messages that we prepare right here, right? So now what we're doing here, it's very basic. In cases where you're using like image and stuff like that, there's a way you can directly pass an image directly to the GPT4 mini model, right? By passing the image URL. So this is actually for the case where you're uploading an image directly, not in the case where you have a document uploaded like a PDF. No, this is actually for the case where you have an image like a PNG, a JPEG, or whatever, uploaded. So we basically have to run this check and pass the URL, the image URL as part of the URL field. So this is what GPT4 model accepts by default. So it shouldn't be a problem. So here we're actually making a call to the model for chat completion. And once we do that, we actually basically log answer generation just to keep a track within the system. And once we have an answer, what we do is that we create the homework conversation model with the answer we got, just with keeping a copy in the DB. This is just one way for us to keep a copy in the DB. So once that is successful, we deduct the balance from the user's account, right? So if it's using a token, we remove the token that was actually used to generate the question, right? Because once you generate a question with GPT model, they give you back the usage, the total tokens that was used to generate an answer for that question, right? So that's the token that we deduct from the user's balance. Perfect, right? So in terms of file size or whatever, we get that from our manual calculation from the top. Okay, so if that is successful, we just return all of this, and that, ladies and gents, is basically how we generate our answer. So once we have an answer in a structured form, we send it over to this event, which is homework underscore assistant response, right? So we send to this event. This event will contain the answer to the question, right? So we just basically log it, and that is it, basically. So that's everything that you can actually think of regarding the backend side of things and in terms of technical implementation of all of this. And I think you guys basically understand. If you don't, please pause the video, take a look back at how, what we talked about, and just reflect around it, because ideally this is exactly how it will be. So I'm going to do a few things for you guys. What I'm going to do, I'm going to change my workspace, right? So I'm going to log out of this, log into a different account. I'm going to demo this to you in real time, how you can use Postman to test the backend endpoint. So we're going to give it a few seconds, it's going to load up, and then we'll proceed. All right, sweet. All right, so we basically have an homework conversations here. This is exactly what I used while debugging, and it contains a few documentation of how we can connect, of how users can connect and stuff like that. But that is really not our problem. What we want to do is to communicate with it, right? So for me to be able to run this, well, I can decide to run it locally. I can decide to run it online as well, right? So all right, so let's just do it. So I'm going to run it locally, so I show you guys how that would work out. Well, let's run it let's run it on prod, right? So on prod is fine, not gonna be a problem. So what we do is that what we normally debug, we can go to the network tab, you go to WS, this is WebSocket, and here you just want to refresh, do Control arrow right there, and you're going to see that we're connected to WebSocket here, right? So the front end is actually well structured, that you only make one socket connection. So I say a lot of people get it wrong here. Whenever they want to connect to socket, they basically have to connect like multiple times and stuff like that. No, basically I have to use what's called singleton on the front end to achieve that. But yeah, when we're discussing the front end, I'll show you guys how we go about that. So I click on it. So we basically have a token and all of it. So this is what we have. So we can use this, right? So I'm going to copy this into the sort of source. So let's paste it there. And so this is something I think we will be having here. So in our case, we can just put everything there. So save that. And so what we're going to do, these are saved responses, by the way. So I'm going to go back and save that. So I'll click on Homework Assistant Conversation. So this is it. I'm going to paste in that guy here. Right, you can see Homework Assistant. Let's see if we're passing in the field itself, because it's very important that we have that. Okay. All right, so I don't think we're passing it. So that's the thing. So Homework Assistant is our namespace, and then we have a token and all of those. So token is the Homework Assistant, be the namespace and all. Okay, all right, let's try to connect to that and see if it works. Okay, so invalid namespace. Okay, let's check it back again, why that is wrong. Homework underscore assistant, then token. Okay, all right, so let's do this. Let's connect to that. Okay, still doesn't connect. That's super weird. Hold on, guys, let's debug this quickly. Okay, you know what? Let's go back. Let's use the generic one. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to open this up. All right, go to project. Go to Brilliance backend. What I'm going to do here, I'm just going to start a server, dev. Okay. And once I do that, I'm going to make sure it's using Redis under the hood for other stuff, but the server won't start with Redis. So I'm just going to spin up a very quick Redis server here. Right here. So we do Redis. So right there, good. We have Redis running, and we're waiting for our app to connect real quick. So when that happens, we can be able to bounce, right? So let's wait, it's gonna take some time. So while that is happening, let's be preparing our view right here. right? So message type, I want the message type to be text, and its new child can be true, message media URL, and that is just a text. All right, so this should be good. Yeah, this should be good. All right, so yeah, so let's wait for it to come up. All right, taking longer than expected. I just refresh this. Shouldn't take this long. All right, sweet. So now we're connected in all of this, and we should be good, right? So, all right, so let's connect this now. You see, we're connected. So we're connected right here. I'm gonna zoom, open it up so you guys can see it properly, and you can see I am Brilliance AI, your home assistant. How can I help you today, right? So the first message I want to send to it is you go to the message tab. You want to put in your object to match in the structure of what you've defined on the back end. And it's going to take in a few events that I'm listening to: system message, disconnect, homework assistant history response. All these are exactly what I showed you before. When you take a look at the socket events, let me show you guys one more time so we are in sync. So these are all the socket events basically, right? So connection, disconnect, reconnect, attempt, error message, ping, and so on. So there are tons of them that you can pick out. So I'm subscribed to all of this, which makes sense. So I can be able to like get responses and all. So at the bottom here, you see that you have the event name, right? As well as the message coming from the event, right? So now I want to make a request, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to say what is 1 plus 1, right? I'm going to send that. So what's going to do is going to say, this is what I'm doing. I'm making the request with all these inputs. First of all, it's telling me that, oh, Brilliance AI is thinking. This is the event that we triggered while the thinking is taking place. And once it's done thinking, what we do is that we basically just have an answer, right? So guys, don't get it twisted. So you can actually see all the events matched exactly what we did. So there's actually an event for typing, there's an event for the home assistant response and all of this. So this is exactly what we have. So this is the response, and this response is in markdown form, like what we are rendering not too long, right? So this is exactly how you go about it, and it's actually real time. So you can actually ask more messages, continue debugging, and so on. All right, so now we talk about the front end system, and it's very straightforward. I'm going to show you guys how the UI looks like. So first of all, we need some sort of layout, and what we do, you can just close up the backend. Yeah. So what we're doing here. So by the way, I'm going to leave a link to this project on the description, right? So you guys basically have access to the whole front end code base. And so the way it works is we have the source folder. We go to app, and then we have a layout, right? So we have the page, we have the layout and stuff. So layout is pretty much very basic. The same thing, nothing changes, like the default that we're using. And then we have the page.tsx. So page.tsx is where the magic happens, where we basically have to, what is actually rendering this entire page. We have it right here in the page.tsx. So I'm going to enlarge this view a bit more so you guys can visualize it better. And so what's happening here is that first off, we need a way to be able to create some sort of socket service, right? So I won't go just explaining all of this. So I created like a separate hook, which is use socket. So this hook basically is very important, guys. Very important, because this is what allows you to only connect to the socket once and not like multiple times. So I'm going to show you where we have like a single thing within the actual socket service, because I created a distinct socket service. With that, we basically have to take care of the single thing right there. All right, so this is actually our socket service, as you can see. Hold on. Right, so here we can see we have a socket service. Socket service takes like the instance of the, this as a socket, and then the socket, the config, connection attempt, max attempt, as well as the reconnection delay. It's going to wait for 1 second before it tries to reconnect again. So we have a get instance here. This is actually where the single thing has been applied. So if we already have an existing instance, we return it, else we create a new instance, right? So this basically prevents you from having multiple sockets connection. So if you come here and I inspect this page again and I go to network tab, you can see we have one connection at every time. So throughout the life cycle of the old socket connection, we are going to be connected once via the client and not twice, not re-rendering and stuff, right? So mind you, Next.js by default in dev mode, it renders twice just for, for it to be able to check for like, effect, right, side effects and all of those. By default, Next.js just does not allow you, doesn't render component once, but it renders it like 2 times just for you to be able to catch errors sooner, right? So even with this, applying singleton allows you to only render it to be able to connect to the socket one time and one time only. Nice. All right. So once we have that, we set up our configuration. So configuration is just trying to call the connect method. Connect method is trying to do all of this. So we have a namespace which we are connecting to. We have the base URL which is right here. And then we have the transport. Please, guys, it's very important. So there are two major types of transports in WebSocket. We have the WebSocket itself, following the WebSocket protocol, and then we have the pooling, right? So pooling is very bad, and it's very drastically bad. And because what happens with pooling is that it basically just make requests like a normal GET request, and just be making requests at every interval, say every 1 second or 2 seconds or whatever. So it's actually defeating the entire purpose of WebSocket connection. That's why you have to be very careful what you specify as a transport. Always make sure it's actually WebSocket and not pooling, right? If that makes sense. So we have the reconnection attempt, set it to true to know if it's going to reconnect or not and stuff like that. So in our query, we are passing the token and the HWA application ID, which is the homework assistant application ID. All right, so here we basically, this is our connect method, by the way. We set up our listener, socket listener. So socket listener here, what it does is it listens to the connect event, listens to the disconnect event, listens to connect error event, and so on, right? And we can actually get socket by, we check if there's actually any socket instance that is active. And if we don't have any, we connect it, else we return this. So notice the socket that we have here is been set somewhere, right? So it's been set here. So this socket is equal to all those bunch of initialization with the IO that we just specified. So on the client, we are using the SocketIO client. So SocketIO basically has both the server and the client libraries that interface with each other. So these are the different packages you use. So on the client, you use the SocketIO client. Okay, so enough with the socket. So once you have your socket now and set up, so we're just going to, what we do is to try to connect. So once we run this, what's it called now? Hook, the use socket hook, we're going to have right here this socket, right? So once we have that, we have lots of other messages. I'm not going to go through this one after the other. Basic use effect and all of it. You guys know how this use state works, right? So this is just a bunch of states that we're using to manage the different state, like messages, is typing, connected, conversations group, and all of those. So this is exactly what you go, what you use for that, right? So you use this. So I'm going to go straight to the part that's important, right? So where we are actually making the effect. So here, this is where we are listening to different events. So here we listen to system message. Here we listen to response. Here we listen to typing. Here we listen to history response. So you can see all those events that we defined under our namespace on the back end, we are reusing all of them on the client, right? In such a way that we can be able to render the data that is being returned back and stuff like that, right? And also we have a cleanup effect here, which we're using to clean them up when you mount, when you unmount, and when you log out and stuff like that, right? So this basically makes sense, and I'm going to scroll down to a few things that are really important, right? So the first thing that's actually that can be challenging, that I think, is always the input, right? So the input here. So let's see how we are building out our input, the ask your question input, and how that works. So I'm going to ask a question. Okay, this should be arrow, by the way. So this is a chart. We have a chart input component. So this component, let's go through it. So this is a very basic component we're using to do some tracking. So what happens here is that we are using to submit. So whenever we submit, we call the handle submit function. And submit function will call the onsend. Onsend is actually what's been passed in as props, just very basic thing which we use to emit event back to the server. Okay, so here we have the handle file select. This is when you upload a file, depending on if it's image or whatever, we check the size, right? It doesn't need to be more than 5 MB. We have a bit front end check against that. And also if it's actually a PDF, we check the size of the PDF should be more than 10 MB. So which makes sense. So irrespective of the media content you uploaded, we're able to track the file size correctly and apply them based off the requirement. All right, so next thing is we have different endpoints on the backend which are using to upload image and upload documents, so you can use those. And once we upload, we basically have the URL. So those URLs will send back to the GPT4 model on the backend, right? So this function, handle file select, basically does that. And handle upload click. So whenever you click on upload, what happens is, we use this basic function to just trigger the click event and stuff. Very, very basic. You guys know how to do this already. And yes, so once you do this is how you basically submit your message. And I think the most interesting part of this is where you want to render the message. So we have a chat message component. This is very elaborate, by the way. So this is what we use to render. As you can see, messages can be of different type. So some messages come with attachment like this. You can see come with this flexi attachment. Some other messages, let's hold on. Let me see. We have another one. So this is an image. We have this, should be a PDF. So some other ones come with attachment like this. So this is the company responsible for handling all of those. So here we are getting the media type to know, okay, what media type are we having, so we know what to render, because our major focus is image and PDF, right? So if we know if it's an image, then we render the image. If we know if it's a PDF, or we return the PDF, right? So we have a separate folder which we're using to preview. So render media preview. So this will be responsible for the preview. So we know the media type. So if it's actually a PDF, what we do is that we are going to render the PDF in an iframe, right? We're going to render the PDF in an iframe. But if it's an image, we render the image in the image tag, of course, right? So once we do that, we're able to basically pull up those conversations there straight up. So one other thing is rendering the content here, right? So I'm going to create a new chart here for you guys. I'm going to do British, so it's going to instantiate, right? So I'm going to say, give me the code to calculate permutation in mathematics. So as I click enter, it does send as well. So there's actually an enter click on the front end. When you check the chat input, you see all of those, like lots of cool stuff. All right, so it's trying to give us like a formula to give, calculate permutation. So this is something that you guys can work on, like, a way to basically, you can use LaTeX, a way to format all of these mathematical expressions, so it's much more presentable, right? So you can see it's giving us like everything. So this is basically a code that we can use, as you can see right here. You can see define permutation, we have all of this. So this is actually an actual code. If you think about it, like a Python code. But I don't think this since I like things really there, right? But I think it basically gives you an idea of what you are, of what we're talking about. All right, so let's go back and let's show you how all of those are done. You can see we're using the React Markdown from the React Markdown component, and you can see there are some with title, with both cases, title, and all of these. So we are able to render all of these now depending on what we have, right? So we have the H1, H2, H3, UL, other list, another list, the code, the paragraph, the pref for the code stuffs, and all of those. So we are using all of this to render the whole component, right? So if that makes sense, right? So this is how we're going about it. And while we're able to visualize the image when you upload the first time, this is what we're using to do that, right? So we have a very small function here, or the function, small block of code here, which we're using to render those information. Right, so once we do that, we're able to show you the attachment and all of those. So guys, so basically, I will actually leave a link to this. I don't need to go over them one after the other, but I feel you guys will understand more when you start playing around with the actual code. So I'll leave a link down in the description for you guys on how to go about this. And then, yeah, so that's obviously it for today. Every other thing stays very basic, nothing more. And I hope you guys really enjoy this episode of our lesson, this new session, right? And then, yeah, without further ado, let's catch you guys on the next one.